January 17th, 1945. A blizzard tore across the frozen fields of northern Germany. Snow whipped like knives. Visibility dropped to a few meters. The wind carried a bitter, unrelenting cold. Footprints disappeared as quickly as they were made. Amid the white chaos, a column of Canadian troops trudged forward. Boots sank into knee-deep snow. Faces numb, eyes squinted against the storm. From the haze, figures emerged, shivering, weak. Women, German prisoners of war. Thin coats, tattered uniforms, faces pale as snow. Hands clenched, teeth chattering. Some fell, couldn't rise. The Canadians hesitated. Orders were to move fast, keep the column intact, but the storm offered no choice. A corporal broke the tension. He lifted one, then another, arms straining under frozen bodies. Blizzard screamed around them. The air smelled of snow, fear, and desperation. Each step forward was a battle, a fight against frost, against time, against death itself. The line between savior and soldier blurred. Survival hung on their shoulders. Winter 1944. Europe was locked in a merciless conflict. The Allies pushed east, the Germans retreated. Every village, every road, every forest became a battlefield. Canadian divisions had crossed into northern Germany months earlier. The 1st Canadian Army advanced along icy rivers. Their supply lines stretched thin. Fuel, food, and ammunition were scarce. The soldiers wore heavy coats, but frostbite was constant. Boots soaked, gloves frozen, faces reddened and cracked by wind. The Wehrmacht was collapsing. The Eastern Front had been lost months prior. German morale was fragile. Young men and women were pulled into service wherever they could be useful. Female auxiliaries, nurses, clerks, even anti-aircraft crews were present near the front lines. Many were captured as the Allies pushed forward. Blizzard slowed every movement. Convoys stalled. Tanks churned through snowdrifts. Artillery froze in place. Commanders adapted on the fly. Winter warfare was as much a battle against the elements as against men. Canadian intelligence knew pockets of German troops remained in villages and woods. Occasionally, small groups surrendered or were taken prisoner. Among these were women, some barely 18. Their presence was a logistical challenge. They needed shelter, food, medical care. The Canadians had orders to process them quickly, yet nature ignored orders. Snowstorms could hide roads entirely. A half-mile march might take hours. Maps were useless in whiteout conditions. Soldiers relied on compass and instinct. Each step risked falling into frozen ditches. Avalanches and ice patches claimed equipment and men alike. The German retreat was desperate. Some units abandoned equipment to move faster. Others hid civilians and wounded behind makeshift barricades. Blizzards amplified confusion. Many were left behind. Those who could not keep pace became prisoners of circumstance. Capturing female POWs presented unique challenges. The Geneva Conventions applied. Women could not be forced to march under extreme conditions. Medical care had to be prioritized. Yet Canadian troops were exhausted, and time was critical. Enemy combatants could attempt escape. The storm itself was the greatest threat. By mid-January, northern Germany was a frozen wasteland. Villages emptied. Smoke rose from destroyed homes. Roads were blocked by abandoned tanks and wreckage. Any movement was perilous. Troops advanced cautiously, scanning for enemy soldiers or someone more vulnerable. It was in this unforgiving winter that the Canadian soldiers encountered the female POWs, shivering, weak, and abandoned on the edge of the blizzard. The scene tested the soldiers' discipline, compassion, and courage. What followed would blur the line between military duty and human morality. The frozen ground, the screaming wind, the desperate prisoners, these were the constants. And ahead, the storm showed no mercy.
The Canadian troops faced more than enemy soldiers. They faced winter itself. Blizzards could immobilize entire divisions. Temperatures dropped to -20 Celsius. Snow drifted over equipment and trenches. Men and women alike struggled to survive. Captured German personnel, including women, were processed according to international law. The Geneva Conventions required humane treatment. Prisoners needed shelter, food, medical attention. Yet winter complicated everything. Transport was slow, roads were blocked. Medical units could barely reach isolated positions. Female POWs were rare at the front lines. Most had been assigned to support roles: nurses, clerks, signal operators. Many were teenagers, thrust into war by circumstance. When retreat came, they were left behind. Some were injured, some were exhausted. Snow and frost had already claimed a few. Canadian officers had to make quick decisions: leave the POWs exposed, risk death; carry them through a blizzard, risk their own troops. Morale depended on both survival and duty. Commanders balanced compassion against military necessity. Every step forward demanded judgment under pressure. Blizzard conditions amplified fear and confusion. Whiteout obscured distance and direction. Foot soldiers could become separated from their units in seconds. Convoys stalled. Signals failed. Even experienced soldiers doubted their senses. Winter warfare required specialized equipment. Trucks, sleds, and half-tracks often became useless in deep snow. Men carried supplies on foot. Clothing froze. Rations became ice. Cold seeped into bones, numbing both body and mind. Casualties from frostbite were as real as bullets. The captured women were in a fragile state. Thin coats, frozen hands, and bare faces betrayed exhaustion. Some could barely stand. Their eyes reflected fear, but also relief. At least someone had come. Canadian soldiers recognized this immediately. Humanity, not strategy, drove their next actions. Orders could not anticipate every scenario. Surrendering combatants were expected to follow protocol, but a storm does not care for orders. Blizzard winds could snatch life in minutes. Every Canadian corporal and private understood this. Some actions were instinctive, some were born of conscience. The snow-covered villages told the story of retreat and collapse. Buildings abandoned, fires burned low. Frozen rivers blocked the roads. German units scattered into forests and fields. The Canadians moved cautiously, step by step, breath visible in the air. Every encounter with a POW required assessment. Medical attention first, safety second, extraction third. Yet in blizzards, extraction often meant carrying bodies through knee-deep snow. The storm punished hesitation. The soldiers pressed on. By the evening of January 17, 1945, the Canadian troops had moved through dozens of kilometers of frozen terrain. They had encountered isolated pockets of German resistance. And then, on the edge of a snow-covered clearing, they found them, the female POWs left to survive the storm. It was a test of everything: endurance, discipline, and humanity. The decisions made here would determine who lived, who died, and who bore the burden of witness. From the frozen fields and desperate prisoners, the story expanded into multiple perspectives. Tactical challenges, leadership choices, human suffering, and moral courage all converged. Each angle revealed another layer of this winter struggle. Human angle. The POWs were fragile figures in the storm. Eyes wide, lips blue, fingers stiff with frost. Some leaned on each other for balance. Fear and fatigue weighed heavily. Memories of retreat, bombardment, and loss etched into their faces. They had survived hunger, cold, and confusion. Now survival depended on strangers. Canadian soldiers saw more than uniforms. They saw human fragility. They saw fear mirrored in every glance. Corporal James McLeod remembered the thin, shivering hands. Private Harris noted the ragged boots soaked through with snow. Every soldier carried a personal conflict. Duty demanded speed. Humanity demanded care. Each step carrying a prisoner was an act of conscience. The storm magnified emotions. Each gust of wind screamed danger. Every stumble could be fatal. Some POWs whispered, praying under their breath. Others were silent, eyes frozen forward, survival instinct engaged. The Canadians' presence offered reassurance, but not warmth. Tactical angle. The Canadians moved cautiously. Their advance relied on scouting and reconnaissance. Whiteout conditions nullified visibility. Every flanking maneuver risked misstep. Commanders weighed speed against safety. Leaving the women exposed was unthinkable. Carrying them slowed the column, but moving without them risked death for both POWs and morale. Supply lines were stretched. Fuel trucks bogged down in drifts. Artillery could not fire from frozen positions. Tanks advanced slowly, chains groaning under ice. Troops relied on compass bearings and memory of terrain. The blizzard itself became a tactical opponent. Noise was absorbed by the wind. Footsteps vanished in seconds. Enemy scouts could strike unseen or not at all. Every decision had to consider both humans and snow. Small unit cohesion was critical. Orders from officers were interpreted in real time, often without signals. Technological angle. Winter equipment was imperfect. Rifles jammed in freezing temperatures. Magazines snapped under brittle fingers. Field telephones cracked in cold. Generators struggled. Vehicles were vulnerable. Half-tracks slid into ditches. Engines failed in the ice. Sleds became the primary method of moving heavy loads, ammunition, rations, and sometimes injured soldiers or POWs. Clothing was inadequate. Coats insulated, but gloves froze. Boots leaked. Socks turned to ice. Canadian engineers improvised with canvas and spare tarps. Fires were essential, but wood was scarce. Snow melted slowly. Water froze quickly. Even the blizzard had an effect on communication. Visual signals disappeared. Sound carried erratically. Soldiers relied on instinct and experience. Every technological tool was tested to its limit. Leadership angle. Canadian officers faced impossible choices. The storm allowed no hesitation. Corporal and lieutenant alike had to weigh life against mission. Lieutenant Robert Sinclair scanned the horizon. Blizzard reduced visibility to near zero. His orders were clear: maintain the column, advance, secure the area. But the sight of shivering POWs demanded action. Decisions were split-second. Leave them exposed? That could mean death. Slow the march to carry them? Risk the entire unit. Sinclair ordered small teams to lift the most vulnerable first. He coordinated movement like a chess master under fire. Every call reflected a balance of humanity and military discipline. Officers communicated silently with gestures and brief commands.
Morale depended on trust. Soldiers had to believe their leaders would protect them and themselves. Leadership was tested not just by the storm, but by the weight of responsibility. Every POW rescued was a victory of conscience. Every misstep risked catastrophe. Enemy angle. The Germans were in retreat. Disorganization ruled their ranks. Some units had collapsed entirely. Others hid in woods, hoping to regroup. Female personnel had been left behind, unable to keep pace. Some tried to find shelter. Some were captured by chance. There was no coordinated opposition. Yet, even retreating enemy forces could strike. Snipers lingered. Mines remained buried under snow. Ambushes were possible in forests and abandoned villages. Canadian troops advanced with caution. The storm itself was the most formidable opponent. It could claim life faster than any enemy bullet. Yet the presence of enemy scouts influenced every decision. No movement was purely humanitarian. Tactical awareness remained critical. Moral or psychological angle. Winter warfare blurred the line between duty and morality. The Canadians carried POWs through knee-deep snow. Each step demanded sacrifice. Fatigue gnawed at muscles. Fear pressed on every chest. Some soldiers questioned the cost. Was risking their unit worth it? Could orders protect them if the storm turned deadly? Yet humanity prevailed. The POW's fear and relief created a silent bond. Soldiers felt responsibility for lives not their own. Moral courage became as essential as physical strength. Carrying the weak was a statement of ethical resolve. The psychological weight was immense. Exhaustion, cold, and responsibility collided. Men who had seen battle now fought nature and conscience together. The storm tested not just survival, but character. The blizzard reached its peak. Snow tore across the field like frozen daggers. Visibility was nearly zero. Every breath burned the lungs. Canadian troops pressed forward. Corporal McLeod carried one prisoner in his arms. Her body shook uncontrollably. Teeth chattered, fingers curled into fists. She whispered a name, a prayer, a hope. Private Harris struggled with another. His boots sank into the drift. Snow filled his gloves, numbing his hands. Every step forward felt heavier. The wind pushed back, relentless, punishing. The storm swallowed sound. Orders shouted were lost within seconds. Only gestures remained. Soldiers moved in tandem, lifting, supporting, urging one another. Lieutenant Sinclair scanned for danger. Forests loomed nearby. Shadows might conceal enemy scouts or hidden mines. But no sight was clear through the whiteout. Risk was unavoidable. One woman collapsed. McLeod caught her before she hit the snow. He shifted her onto his back, muscles burning. The storm screamed around him. Every second counted. Snow mounds hid trenches, frozen ditches, hidden hazards. Private Harris nearly fell into a frozen ravine. A soldier behind grabbed his arm. The chain moved forward, fragile yet determined. Some POWs were carried two at a time on improvised sleds. Canvas stretched over wooden frames. Men pulled with frozen fingers. The sleds scraped over ice, scraped over snow, groaned under weight. Time became a blur. Minutes felt like hours. Fatigue gnawed at arms and legs. The storm offered no mercy. A sudden gust swept through the column. Snow blinded eyes, froze lips, stole breath. One soldier slipped. Another nearly went down with him. Panic threatened, yet instinct, training, and moral resolve held firm. Corporal McLeod spotted a faint glimmer ahead, a small village, shelter, Fire! Survival! He signaled the others. The column shifted direction, careful not to lose pace. Some POWs cried silently. Relief mingled with exhaustion. They had survived bullets, retreat, and chaos, but nature had its final test. A frozen creek blocked the path. The current was invisible beneath thick ice. Men tested every step. A misstep meant death or severe injury. One POW was carried across in a soldier's arms. The ice creaked ominously under each weight. He moved slowly, deliberately, muscles straining. The Canadians were not heroes by legend. They were men fighting exhaustion, fear, and storm. Yet every step forward was a small victory, a testament to discipline, courage, and humanity. By nightfall, the storm began to relent. Snow slowed its assault. Visibility improved just enough to see the outline of a farmhouse. Shelter awaited. Fires could be lit. Medical care could begin. Exhausted, frostbitten, but alive, the POWs were finally under cover. The Canadians had carried them through near impossible conditions. Bodies sagged with fatigue, eyes closed for the first time in hours. The blizzard had tested limits. It had separated strength from endurance. It had demanded morality in action, and it had created a moment that would linger in memory long after the snow melted. This was only the first part of the climax. The storm's final challenge, the aftermath of the rescue, and the soldiers' exhaustion would define the turning point entirely.
The storm eased, but the cold lingered. Fingers were blue, faces swollen, breath shallow. Every soldier felt the weight of hours spent in the blizzard. Every POW trembled from shock and exposure. Lieutenant Sinclair moved among the rescued women. He checked pulses, shivered as he noted frostbite and exhaustion. Corporal McLeod and Private Harris helped them into makeshift shelters. Blankets were sparse, fires struggled to catch. Smoke curled upward into the dim sky, carrying warmth and hope. Some prisoners could barely stand. Their legs refused commands from the mind. Hands were stiff, cracked, numb. Soldiers lifted them again, one at a time. Each step toward warmth was a victory. Outside, the storm's remnants swirled. Snow drifted against walls. Ice formed on every roof and branch. The battlefield was silent. Only distant groans of frostbite and fatigue pierced the air. Canadian troops gathered in small groups. Exhaustion was universal. Cold seeped through layers of clothing. Men sat where they could, heads bowed, shoulders trembling. Yet amidst fatigue, there was relief. The prisoners were alive. The storm had not claimed them. Medical officers documented conditions. Some women were near hypothermia. Others showed signs of malnutrition. They had survived the retreat, the capture, and the blizzard. Survival now required warmth, care, and steady hands. The column's officers assessed the terrain. Blizzard had reshaped it. Paths were blocked, vehicles immobilized. Troops needed to consolidate before advancing. Every minute outside the shelter risked more frostbite, more injury. Yet even in exhaustion, soldiers reflected on what had been achieved. They had carried women through knee-deep snow. They had risked themselves for humanity, not orders. The war demanded discipline, but here, courage and morality intertwined. Reports later described the rescue in stark terms. One corporal wrote, "I had never felt fear like that, not from bullets, but from snow, from cold, from the thought of failing those in my arms." The storm became legend among the units, not for heroics alone, but for the moral choice it demanded. Every soldier carried that day forward in memory and in scars. Nearby, German forces regrouped in scattered villages. Their retreat was complete, but the blizzard had spared few. Witnesses later noted the shock among captured personnel.
Some whispered gratitude, others said nothing. The storm had tested enemies, soldiers, and civilians alike. By late evening, fires were finally steady, blankets distributed, medical checks complete. The rescued POWs rested. Canadian troops remained vigilant even in fatigue. The war had not ended, but in this small corner, humanity triumphed over nature's cruelty. The blizzard left its mark. Snow-covered fields, frozen equipment, exhausted soldiers, and shivering POWs. The event reshaped tactical thinking. It reminded officers and men alike that survival was never just a matter of weapons or strategy. It was also about judgment, compassion, and courage under extreme conditions. As the storm faded completely, the Canadian troops prepared for the next phase. Paths had to be cleared, supplies distributed, prisoners processed. The war pressed on. But for that night, the blizzard had been beaten, lives had been saved. The turning point had been reached, not through artillery, tanks, or gunfire, but through human will. The rescue of the POWs set the stage for consequences, both immediate and long-term. It would be remembered in reports, diaries, and memories.
The blizzard had passed. Silence settled over the frozen fields. The rescued POWs lay under blankets, shivering but alive. Corporal McLeod and other soldiers moved carefully among them. Medical officers recorded frostbite, exposure, and minor injuries. Several women required immediate treatment. Feet and hands were swollen, lips cracked, faces pale. Rations were handed out. Hot tea steamed in metal cups. For many, it was the first warmth in days. Troops gathered to debrief. They recounted the blizzard, the risk, the frozen terrain. Exhaustion was universal. Muscles cramped, fingers trembled, eyes burned from snow and wind. Lieutenant Sinclair documented every detail: distance marched, number of POWs carried, each risk noted, frozen ditches, hidden creeks, near slips. His report emphasized both tactical and moral choices. Survival statistics were sobering. Out of dozens of women found, almost all lived. A few required extended care. Those who could not be moved quickly might have perished. Canadian soldiers reflected on the thin line between life and death that day. The rescued women, once terrified, began to show signs of relief. Some whispered quietly, others clutched hands, unable to speak. The human connection between rescuer and rescued was undeniable. News of the rescue spread through the units. Word reached officers and medics. Some soldiers shared their own fear and doubt. Others praised the discipline and courage it took to act against both storm and protocol. Supply chains were immediately reassessed. Blizzard conditions had slowed movement. Future operations now accounted for extreme weather, improvised transport, and human vulnerability. Every officer noted the importance of prioritizing the weak, not just as prisoners, but as human beings. Canadian leadership reviewed the chain of command decisions. Corporal-level judgment had proven decisive. Small unit initiative had saved lives. Tactical success was interwoven with moral courage. The POWs were eventually transported to secured camps. Medical checks continued. Some recovered fully. Others bore frostbite scars for life. Yet all remembered the storm and those who carried them. The troops themselves carried physical and psychological fatigue. Night fell over the snowfields. Blankets, fires, and brief rest offered only temporary relief. Men would awaken to continue their advance into northern Germany. The war demanded progress, but memory of the rescue lingered in every step. The blizzard had claimed no lives among the rescued, but it reshaped thinking.
Commanders now considered the human cost of extreme weather in planning operations. Every soldier who had carried a prisoner felt its weight in muscle and conscience. Reports filed that night highlighted the unusual circumstances. "The storm was our enemy and our test," one corporal noted. "Survival demanded courage, judgment, and humanity in equal measure." The immediate aftermath revealed lessons for both strategy and morale. Troops bonded over shared hardship. POWs would remember the Canadian soldiers who risked themselves to save strangers. Even enemy observers would later note the remarkable determination. Snow would continue to fall in the region. Winter campaigns would test units repeatedly, but the blizzard of January 17, 1945, remained a defining moment. It was a story of survival, courage, and moral resolve under impossible conditions.
The storm's legacy extended beyond the immediate rescue. Canadian units regrouped. Advances continued cautiously through snowbound terrain. Commanders adjusted strategies to account for weather, human limitations, and the need to safeguard POWs. Reports emphasized lessons learned. Blizzard conditions demanded more than firepower. They required foresight, improvisation, and moral judgment. The experience reshaped planning for winter campaigns. Troop movements, supply lines, and evacuation procedures were revised. The rescued POWs arrived at secured camps. Medical care stabilized most. Some bore frostbite scars for life. Yet their survival offered more than physical relief. It became a symbol of human endurance and the fragile line between life and death. Troop morale was affected in multiple ways. Canadian soldiers reflected on what it meant to act in the face of danger and uncertainty. Shared fatigue and moral responsibility forged stronger bonds among men. They had carried not only bodies, but the weight of conscience. Letters and diaries recorded the ordeal, emphasizing the human aspect of war, beyond strategy or orders. Enemy observers took notice as well. Some German units reported surprise at the Canadians' treatment of prisoners. The event highlighted contrasts in conduct, discipline, and humanity. Even amidst defeat, respect was noted in post-war accounts and memoirs. The winter campaign had broader consequences. Supply and medical procedures were adjusted across Allied forces. Future engagements considered weather as a strategic variable. Commanders recognized that nature could kill as efficiently as artillery. Soldiers had to be prepared for both combat and climate. For the rescued women, survival carried psychological weight. Some later recounted the day as a turning point, fear replaced by gratitude, terror replaced by human care. The blizzard became a story told within the camps. It reminded them of both vulnerability and resilience. Canadian military historians later cited the event as an example of leadership and initiative at the small unit level. Orders were limited, yet initiative saved lives. Corporal and private-level decisions influenced outcomes beyond immediate tactical concerns. It demonstrated how morality and strategy could coexist in high-stakes situations. The blizzard also affected public perception. Accounts filtered through letters, post-war histories, and memoirs. Stories of POWs rescued in extreme conditions reinforced the image of Allied forces as disciplined, humane, and morally responsible. This contrasted with images of harsh winter retreats by the Germans. Numbers alone do not tell the story. Survival rates, frostbite cases, and logistical challenges were recorded meticulously. Yet the human dimension, courage, care, moral resolve, resonated more deeply.
Soldiers and POWs alike carried the memory forward. The experience influenced subsequent operations in northern Germany. Commanders moved with heightened awareness of terrain, weather, and human vulnerability. Evacuation plans incorporated lessons from the storm. Blizzards were no longer an uncontrollable variable. They became a factor in operational planning. The event's significance endured beyond the war. Historians and military analysts studied it as a case of moral decision-making under extreme conditions. It exemplified the intersection of humanity, strategy, and nature. The rescue became a symbol of courage, not just against an enemy, but against the elements and the limits of endurance. The blizzard faded, leaving frozen landscapes and exhausted troops. But its lessons persisted in military doctrine, personal memory, and historical record. The rescue of the German female POWs remained a testament to human resilience and moral courage.
The blizzard of January 17, 1945, left no heroes in the traditional sense. It left humans tested against nature, duty, and conscience. Canadian soldiers carried bodies through snow, yet they carried something more: responsibility, empathy, and moral courage. Winter warfare had always been a battle of endurance. Blizzards spared no one, soldier or prisoner. The storm reminded all who survived that survival depended not only on strategy, weapons, or numbers, but on judgment and humanity. The rescued POWs, thin and frozen, embodied vulnerability and resilience. Their survival was a testament to both circumstance and the deliberate choices of those who aided them. Every life saved was a quiet victory, unheralded in military dispatches, yet monumental in its human significance. For the soldiers, the memory endured in muscle and conscience. Fatigue, frostbite, and fear were balanced by relief, pride, and a renewed sense of purpose. The storm blurred the line between combat and care. It proved that courage could be expressed in lifting the weak as much as in advancing on the enemy. Strategically, the event reshaped thinking in winter operations. Commanders factored weather, human limits, and the moral imperative into planning. Blizzards were not merely obstacles, they became critical considerations for survival and effectiveness. History remembers battles, tactics, and losses. Yet moments like this remind us that war is not only a contest of weapons and territory, it is also a test of conscience, endurance, and the human capacity for compassion under the harshest conditions. The frozen fields of northern Germany, once a theater of struggle, now stand as a silent monument. To soldiers who persevered, to prisoners who survived, to the human spirit enduring in the face of nature's fury. In the end, the blizzard was more than a storm. It was a crucible, a moment where humanity, morality, and survival converged. And in that convergence, lives were saved, lessons were learned, and history witnessed the quiet, enduring power of conscience amidst war.